This is the Decibel Geek Podcast with Aaron Camaro and Chris Sinzak.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Decibel Geek Podcast, where we're building a local music scene with a worldwide audience. I'm Chris Sinzak. He's Aaron Camaro, the one with the shredded voice this evening. How's it going, man?
I'm doing pretty good, man. It's the Decibel Geek Podcast time, and I'm ready to rock and roll.
You guys didn't know, but Aaron's going through puberty right now.
That's right. Like I said, I wish it was a video show. I'd show everybody. This is a very important day for me. I'm finally becoming a man.
In reality, Aaron was the master of ceremonies, as he usually is, for a very big deal of a local wrestling promotion last night. I know we're not a wrestling show, but I think most of our listeners will know who the main event was. You go ahead and share that with us.
Well, it was a huge event all the way around. Goldust was there, and of course Bret the Hitman Hart. So many people turned out for it. There was over 2,000 people at the Tennessee State Fairgrounds. Like you said, I was the host of the whole deal, so I'm out there screaming my ass off on the microphone all night long, and this is the result of it, I guess.
His glory years, kind of run, concurrently with the glory years of a lot of the stuff we cover.
That's true. That's true. You got to think about like the heyday of wrestling. Wrestling and music kind of go hand in hand together, because it's like if you look at the changes in music, the changes in professional wrestling kind of follow suit like that, but it's all like the form of entertainment.
Yeah,
you know?
And as anyone that knows us knows that we're big Kiss fans, so we like characters. Although I wasn't a big fan of the Kiss wrestler.
And you know what? I liked the Kiss Demon. That guy was pretty good. A guy named Dale Torborg. Yeah, good wrestler.
Wasn't he? He's the son of the guy that used to manage the Chicago White Sox, I think.
And he works for the White Sox, I believe.
Does
too.
He?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
That AJ Przinsky, he's a big wrestling guy. He's involved in TNA wrestling quite a bit.
Tits and ass wrestling. No, it's total nonstop.
Total nonstop action. Yeah. But what I do is Crossfire, and we've got some big stuff coming up, so that's pretty cool. But fear not, it shall not interfere with the Decibel Geek Podcast.
Yeah, I guess we need
except for right now with my voice.
Yeah. Well, talking about the glory days of the stuff that we cover and the music that we cover, I think today's guest would certainly qualify for being basically right in the center of a lot of that stuff.
Absolutely. You know, if somebody came up and asked me and said, what were your favorite TV shows of all time, I would put the Headbangers Ball right up there. It's got to be at least in the top 3.
Yeah, for sure, absolutely. Today's guest is Riki Rachtman, the guy that did the majority of the hosting on there. He replaced Adam Curry in 1990.
Riki Rachtman was the guy that hosted the Headbangers Ball while it was cool.
Yeah. Well, Adam Curry had the look, but I never got the impression that he really dug a lot of the music he was spinning on that show.
He didn't really... The same people that did his hair were the same people that did poor Rob Fleischman's hair on that Vinnie Vincent cover.
Yeah, maybe the same person.
Probably had to have been the same hairstyle.
Although Adam Curry, I'm not going to put you down. Adam Curry is one of the fathers of podcasting. So yeah, he's one of the first people to get into it. So my hat's off. So, but Riki was nice to come on. Before we get into the discussion with Riki, I got a couple of things of business to take care of. This week's Geek of the Week, and this guy, it's been coming for a long time for him because he's been a supporter of the Decibel Geek Podcast for a while. It's a guy named Robert Foster in Utah, and Robert has left loads of comments and joined in on the discussion on the Facebook page, facebook.com/DecibelGeek. Always has good comments and comments on the shows, gives us great feedback. He's a real fan of the show.
Utah, the sexiest of all states.
Yeah, he might be. I don't know if he's our lone Utah listener or not. I'll have to check the statistics. But Robert, congratulations. Your Monopoly money's on its way, and you get the prestige of being the Decibel Geeks Geek of the Week.
But only for a week, so you better brag while you can.
Yeah.
Tell all your friends and family.
And also, welcome to all those of you that are checking us out, maybe possibly for the first time on Maximum Threshold Radio over at MaximumThreshold.net. If it's Friday night around 7 p.m. Eastern, you can hear us every week. Back to Riki Rachtman, our guest today. If you don't know, Riki Rachtman hosted the Headbangers Ball from 90 to 95, and I got to have this discussion with him recently, and he was very, very good in his answers, and he didn't shy away from anything I asked him. The first time I saw Riki, though, was before his gig on the Headbangers Ball. He was interviewed as the owner of the Cathouse in L.A., a very big club on the Sunset Strip era of the 80s with all the hair bands. He was interviewed for the Decline of Western Civilization Part 2 movie.
Great movie.
And there's a big feature on there with interview with Riki, and then also with co-owner and Riki's friend and roommate Tammy Down of Faster Pussycat.
Love that band.
Great band, and they're still friends to this day. And in fact, I want to plug this while before we get into the conversation. You'll hear more about it. Riki is he's doing I think it's just really just for fun, but he and Tammy Down are doing this thing that they call the Marada ride, and it's a motorcycle ride that they're doing, and they started there. I think as of today, when we're recording this, they're in Washington State, but they started all the way down in Mexico, and they're going all the way through the United States into Canada and then back.
Nice.
On motorcycles, and
that sounds pretty sweet.
They're in Washington State tonight, and last night they were in Washington State, and they saw a Super Sucker show. I saw the update.
I love that band, man.
We should play them sometime.
Absolutely, they've got a million great tunes.
But yeah, so he's doing that, and his current gig now is he does a lot of NASCAR stuff. He's done wrestling stuff in the past. We were just talking about wrestling. Thank you, Riki, for coming on the show. I hope you dig this episode, and I guess we'll go ahead and get into it. This is Riki Rachtman.
3 days to write a radio show, and I've got to do 3 shows by tomorrow at noon, and it's just like, it's brutal because I got to start doing a lot of stuff in advance.
Wow, and you wanted
it's not easy.
And you still wanted to come on with me. I'm surprised. I appreciate that.
Yeah, I got to take a break eventually.
All right. Well, what can you share a little bit about where the idea for this motorcycle ride came from?
Are you recording this right now?
Yeah, I mean, it records immediately when I start doing it.
Okay, good. I've always been riding motorcycles. I had a motorcycle before I had a car, and I've always ridden Harleys or Triumphs or whatever. So Gilby Clark was always riding to Sturgis, from the longest time, and I used to get so jealous. Mm-hmm. And L.A. to Sturgis and back is about 4,000 miles.
Wow.
So I started doing it, and I've been riding to Sturgis for the past 4 years. And this year, my original goal was I was going to ride from Los Angeles to Indianapolis for the NASCAR race, then go to the Corvette factory and go to Graceland and do all this stuff, but that would have ended up and then go to Sturgis, and that would have ended up taking out well over a month.
Yeah.
So I can't do that. So what I decided to do is something that I call mexam marada, and Monday I'm going to ride to Rosarito, Mexico, and then I'm going to take the coast all the way from Mexico, all the way up California, Oregon, Washington, into Canada, into Creston, Canada. I'm going to camp there, and then go from Canada through Idaho, Montana, and go to Sturgis for about 5 days, then ride back. It ends up being 3 countries and 11 states, and the only person that's doing the entire ride with me is Tammy Down.
That is a trip. So he's
which is really cool because Tammy and I had fallouts throughout the years, and we used to be roommates, and we opened the Cathouse together. And when he started riding motorcycles about 2 years ago, we started hanging out and riding all the time, and he rode with me to Sturgis last year, and he's ridden to Mexico with me, and so just him and I are going on this ride together on 2 separate bikes, and I'm really excited. It's gonna be a lot of fun.
That's cool. Being a non-motorcycle person, I've honestly never even ridden one. From the people I know that ride them, there's just some sort of unspoken, peace that you get out of riding. Would you say that's true?
Well, for me, there is. I would say 98% of the people, especially that own Harley Davidsons, don't ever go riding over 50 miles. They go to the bar and then they stop outside and look cool and play the Sons of Anarchy theme. But I ride far. I like riding I've ridden to Utah by myself, I've ridden to Arizona by myself, Vegas by myself, and there's something about riding that it's the only time when my mind is really like, because I'm a stress case, I'm a nut, and when I'm riding, I really truly relax, and especially to go through the coast and the Black Hills and Mount Rushmore and so much beautiful country that it's just the best. And you do not, when you're driving a car, it's like you're driving to get someplace, and when you're on a bike, the journey is way better than the destination. You know,
Right.
it's just you enjoy going there. I can't wait to get on the road. You know, we wouldn't stop if we didn't have to, but we're going to.
That's awesome, man. Well, I want to go back a little bit. I know I was researching you, and it's I got to just say, it's a trip talking to you because you are someone who I grew up watching on television. So,
Well, thank you very much.
Oh, and you were an influence on me wanting to do this podcast, actually, because, like, you know, growing up and being like a 12-year-old watching you on Headbangers Ball, I was like, man.
Okay, now you're making me feel really old.
You're not that much older than me. I'm not gonna lie.
Oh, really? Then how did you watch me when I was 12?
Well, I was 12, but I mean, you were pretty young when you got that gig, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was a lot older than 12. But people, it's funny because, you know, people say, oh, yeah, dude, I grew up watching you. I remember watching you when I was a little kid, and then the conversation, you know, carries on. They go, well, we're probably about the same age. I'm like, hey, you watched me when you were a kid, okay? And I wasn't a kid then, so please don't do the math, but
okay.
It's just funny. I mean, it's flattering. I like that people that said they grew up watching me, but also still think of me as a peer, as opposed to being like, you know, Captain Kangaroo or Mr. Rogers, who is who I grew up watching.
Right, and I guess it's also kind of the power of television, and nowadays the power of YouTube, where it's almost like you never age. You're forever the age you were when you were hosting that show. And,
pretty much. I mean, I'm lucky because I'm healthy and I run and I exercise and I don't look as old as most of the people that are my age.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, I'm lucky because I never ever really had to do the stuff like grow up or get old. You know, I've been working, you know, nonstop, but I still play and I still do the same stupid stuff that I did when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
I just wake up much more sore now.
Well, when you know, and a lot of the stuff I've read of you on interviews was that you've got a pretty diverse taste in music, and you always have. Now, when you were growing up out in Van Nuys and back in the 70s, what were the main things that got you into rock? What made you fall in love with rock and roll? Who were the bands?
I would say, well, the thing is, as a kid, I liked all types of music, and I liked roots rock and roll, like Elvis Presley and Gene Vincent and Eddie Cochran. Mm-hmm. And that was because my dad was a manager, and he managed a band called Flash Cadillac and the Continental Kids that used to play 50s music.
Oh, okay.
And they were like, if you know Steel Panther, they were like the Steel Panther of 50s music. They would do a rude, crazy stage show, and they played 50 music, so I'd always grow up listening to that. Mm-hmm. But as far as rock and roll as a young age, I just thought that Alice Cooper was the coolest thing in the world, mm-hmm. and, you know, I still do. And then I really started getting into Nugent, and then as I started to turn about, like 14 or 15, I got really into punk rock. And so my teenage years were like, you know, I've said before, I listened to a lot more Black Flag than Black Sabbath when I was a kid. I listened to punk. And, you know, it was you know, and we're talking, you know, 20 years before Green Day. This is like old school punk rock, and this was my favorite. And at that time, you know, there were times when Guns N' Roses were playing shows. They were playing with Johnny Thunders, and they were playing punk shows. You know, they weren't playing this typical, you know, rock stuff that we think they were. And in the early 80s, there was a great theme because there was like the Sunset Strip rock bands, and then there was this like Gypsy Junkie that were the people that were like into New York Dolls, and that's where your Guns N' Roses, LA Guns, Faster Pussycat, all that came from, was that scene, which was really a mixture of rock and roll and punk.
Well, yeah, you mentioned Faster Pussycat, and you mentioned Tammy earlier. Well, you know, and I always got the impression from them that, yeah, I mean, they had some radio-friendly songs, but they also had kind of a good, you know, kind of a sleazy punk/glam sound to their music. And there was it's interesting you mentioned Guns N' Roses also, because there's so many of those bands from that time that everyone wanted to lump them together, and I never really understood that. And like especially Guns N' Roses being lumped in with hair bands, because I think they're the last thing you would call, you know, a glam rock band. But I mean, you were there and you witnessed it firsthand, and it was interesting reading about the Cathouse in particular. You opened this club up, and then you've got such a weird mix of people hanging out in that place. I mean, you've got Axl hanging out with David Bowie, and down the bar is James Hetfield. I mean, describe a little bit about what the vibe was like, you know, in that place.
Well, when I opened the Cathouse, first of all, there was nobody that was doing a rock and roll dance club. The whole purpose was to open up a dance club with a DJ that would play only rock and roll. And you know, the idea wasn't to have bands, and everybody would hang out there. And because we weren't the guys that were saying, hey, the hot chicks come to Cathouse, but they were. This is where all the strippers and all the mud wrestlers, after work, they'd all go to the Cathouse because we weren't the place that would do that. So then because all these girls started going there, then all these rock stars started going there. And then because more rock stars were going there, more girls started going there. And it just got this reputation of being this real decadent place till, you know, you would see Aerosmith or Motley Crue or, you know, a fun story was Depeche Mode did a record release party, and the Sunset Strip was shut down, and they started a riot. And the guys from Depeche Mode came to the Cathouse, and they walked in there, and nobody cared. Nobody bugged you. I mean, the thing is, you don't see a lot of videos, and you don't see a lot of photos from the Cathouse because I didn't allow cameras in there. And that way, you could do whatever you wanted, whether you're, you know, Robert Plant or Malcolm Forbes, the millionaire. Anybody could do whatever they wanted at the Cathouse, and there wouldn't be any repercussions. You know, I never thought it would have made such an impact that, you know, 26 years later, I'm still talking about it and still selling T-shirts.
Right.
So I didn't bother taking pictures or stuff like that. But, you know, we were the place that it didn't really matter who you were. It didn't matter if you were a scumbag, and it didn't matter if you know, were rich. If you drove the nice Lamborghini, don't think you're parking it in front and getting in front of everybody else, because you're not. Right.
And it's interesting that you guys would go out of your way to sort of make it a home away from home for the celebrities that were there. Because nowadays, you know, hell, it's the exact opposite nowadays with the whole TMZ thing. It's like everyone's out to get your photograph of getting you doing something stupid. You know, that wouldn't really that probably wouldn't fly today at all, would it?
Yeah, no. I mean, we would have been on that show every week, from the fist fights to the ODs to the sex to everything. I mean, it was just crazy, and it was just mind. And what happened was, you know, the bands that when we started letting bands play, the bands, I was very, very picky on who played the Cathouse. They had to get approval from me, and it wasn't a point of, you know. The only band, this is kind of funny, the only band that ever paid me to play at the Cathouse was the Black Crowes.
Really?
Because they wanted to play a gig before they started playing their LA shows, and I listened to their tape, and I liked them, and their manager said, look, what if I give you $400, we'll put 100 people on the list, we'll put them on really early, and he also managed David Lee Roth at the time, and I told him, I'm like, hey, I'll let these Black Crowes play the Cathouse because I like their music. But if I do, will you maybe hook me up with David Lee Roth, you know, playing here one night? Well, I'll see what I can. Little did we know, you know, that the Black Crowes played. They were awesome.
Yeah.
And look what happened. And the same thing happened with Pearl Jam opening up for Alice in Chains.
Yeah, that's that's interesting because I think a lot of people, when they think of the Cathouse, they immediately just think of the Sunset Strip glam stuff. But you guys hosted quite a diverse range of groups, and a lot of groups that broke wide open right after that.
Pearl Jam, Alice in Chains, Stone Temple Pilots, Motorhead, Ice-T, Megadeth, White Zombie. I mentioned Pearl Jam. Guns N' Roses, I can't even tell you how many times they played, but it was like endless. And I mean, there's times that people tell me bands that played there that I didn't even remember played there.
Now, of those big ones that broke that you mentioned, honestly, were there any of them when they played at the time you're like, these guys will never make it?
I didn't think anybody would make it.
Really?
To the point they made it. Yeah,
right.
I never thought. Well, okay, I'll tell you one band that I really thought would never make it. They were friends of mine, so I let them play the Cathouse, and I let them open up for a bunch of different bands. And at that time, they were called the Shrinky Dinks. And they were just real goofy, and the singer was a friend, and I was like, I'll let you play. And we all knew they would never end up to be anything. And they ended up changing their name to Sugar Ray.
Really?
And went a little poppier, and obviously they did quite well.
Yeah.
And that was like the biggest surprise. No, I'm like, Mark, you know, it was Mark McGrath. I'm like, Mark's never going to be a rock star. And it was funny to see what happened.
Were you
thinking? But you were right about certain bands. Like, the thing is, you know, you'll never read a Riki Rachtman interview where I ever say the word hair bands, because I hate that term. Because, I mean, first of all, there were so many different kind of music. Was, you know, L.A. Guns was not the same as Warrant.
Exactly.
You know, unfortunately, a band like Skid Row got lumped into that whole thing. And Skid Row was a great rock and roll band, but because Baz was good looking and they opened up for Bon Jovi and they played all these shows, they got lumped into that like really poppy thing, and the singles were ballads that were getting released. But Skid Row was a great, great band.
Yeah, especially as Slave to the Grind will attest. You know, I mean, it's
oh my God,
it's one of the top-notch records from that era.
And now, Deep Thoughts with Tommy Lee.
What color panties are you wearing?
Listen to the Decibel Geek Podcast on your iPhone, Android phone, BlackBerry, and WebOS phones with Stitcher. Stitcher's smart radio for your phone. Find it in your app store or at Stitcher.com. Stitcher Smart Radio, the smarter way to listen to radio.
Well, and then speaking of Guns N' Roses, then, you know, your friend Axl ends up getting you the audition for Headbangers Ball. Now, how does that come about? Were you guys watching the show and he said you'd be good at this, or how did the thought of even auditioning come about?
That's almost exactly what happened. I would watch first of all, I never watched Headbangers Ball because it was Saturday night, and I'd be out on Saturday night. But if somebody was on it, I'd watch it. So I remember Faster Pussycat was on Headbangers Ball, and this is way before I was even considered as a host. So I went home, because that time me and Tammy were roommates, and I remember Tammy saying on Headbangers Ball, yeah, man, I want to say hey to my roommate Riki. He probably digs hearing his name on TV. No idea that I ended up being the host of that show.
Yeah.
So we were talking about it, and Axl mentioned, Axl, I think his manager at the time, somebody was talking about it, and I was saying, that would be fun. And they're like, dude, do you want me to make a call? And I'm like, well, yeah, that would be fun. I didn't have any goals of being on TV or anything. So I'm like, yeah, that'd be a blast. So Axel's like, hey, I got you an audition. I'm going to fly to New York with you. I'm like, okay. So it was the first time I ever flew business class.
Yeah.
And we stayed up at the Mayflower Hotel, and when I went to the audition, he walked in with me. And I will tell you right now, if people's like, oh, yeah, it's, who you know. Totally. If Axl wasn't with me, they would have been fools to give me that job, because I had no experience in TV, and my audition tape was terrible. And what happened is I started becoming more and more comfortable being on TV, and my biggest problem is that when I hang out with people, I'm a person, as you can tell by this interview, I like to talk a lot.
That's good.
And in my interviews, I never sat there with a card with questions. I engaged in conversation, and sometimes I talk too much. I mean, I know I was criticized for that in some of the interviews, and it's 100% fact. I admit it, because I love to sit and talk, and then I get going. So, the interviews, the problem is that the interviews didn't get to go always the way I wanted. They were very strict on what I did.
Yeah.
And I never picked a song on MTV either.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because, of course, that you got a horribly bad rap back in the day going, well, Ricky's deciding to do this, or he doesn't want this band to get played. And at the time when you're a kid thinking that, you're thinking, why did he pick that? And then, but not knowing that in hindsight, you've got producers. Still get it
to this day.
You've got producers in your ear going, no, you're not going to say that.
No. There's only one thing that I picked on Headbangers Ball, and I came up with the triple thrash threat. The 3 metal songs in a row, and the name and everything, I came up with that. Oh. But when they're playing bands like Firehouse on Headbangers Ball, I don't know if we played Firehouse, but, bands like Slaughter on Headbangers Ball, people are saying, fucking Riki says he likes, Slayer, and he's playing Slaughter. Right. And I'm like, okay, this is my job. Well, if it was my job, I would tell them to not play. I'm like, are you out of your mind? I'm flying to New York every 10 days. I'm making money. I never said I liked a band that I didn't like.
Right.
But when there was a band that I really liked, I would go off on them. So then it also started looking like Riki likes every band.
Right.
But I only liked the bands that I said I liked, because there were bands that I didn't like.
Well, one thing I liked about Headbangers Ball that that they did do was, like, of course you were going to get flack because of this, but I liked that you would see a Slaughter video and then you would see a DRI video, you know, because
the thing is, if I did program the show, it wouldn't be just. I mean, I tend to like the heavier stuff. I always have, or the kind of I like the heavy stuff, or like the New York Dolls-ish type of stuff.
Sure.
But that doesn't mean I wouldn't play the bands like the, you know, Bang Tangos or stuff like that. They would, because what Headbangers Ball needed to be was the place that played the rock videos that you're not seeing anywhere else.
Right.
And that's all different genres. It can't cater to just one type of rock and roll because there's so many different kinds.
Well, and it's a losing battle with rock and roll fans, as I've learned with my show, because, I mean, I'll play something by Pantera one week, and then the next week I'll play, you know, Vinnie Vincent Invasion, but then you're without fail you're going to hear somebody go, "Why are you playing those posers?" or "Why are you playing those rednecks?" You know, and it's just like, because I guess rock fans are almost more boisterous about what they like and what you should do. I don't know, I guess it's more of a mob mentality.
No, not almost, without a doubt. Rock fans are the most passionate, and you got to love that because, you know, but the thing is, what you have to understand is we need to play all these type of musics, because if it was just a metal thrash show, it wouldn't have got the ratings it would have.
Well,
instead of saying, cool, they're playing Sepultura, and they're playing freaking Napalm Death, and they're playing all this, you know, 5 really cool videos. Instead, it's like, you know, why do you play those 2 crappy videos?
Right.
Because there's also people that say, why do you play the heavy stuff? We want more, you know, pretty boy bands or whatever.
Right. Well, I mean, to me, it was an education, because I got to learn, you know, about a whole broad range of groups. So I enjoyed the fact that it was varied, or because, you know, later on when they relaunched it, it was pretty much nothing but like thrash bands, and it's just like, well, shit, I don't want to listen.
Jamie I really like Jamie Josta a lot.
Yeah.
But the thing that lacked in the Headbangers Ball is it wasn't as fun anymore, and the reason is because Jamie Josta sings in Hatebreed.
Right.
And you can't throw a pie in the singer of Hatebreed's face.
Yeah.
And you can't goof around and make the singer of Hatebreed look like a clown because he's Jamie Josta, and that's not him, even though he's a great guy.
Yeah.
But you can't, you know, I did not mind being the butt end of the joke. I knew there were people that didn't like me, but that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. You know, it's better for people to not like you than not know who you are.
Mm-hmm. Well, it was...
So...
Yeah, and you certainly were the target of lots of things thrown your way during that
Still
show.
am.
Oh, are you? Well, I'm referring to more like cupcakes and pies and water, you know, water.
Oh, yeah. That stuff was always set up by friends. I mean, you know, Fred Corey, the drummer of Cinderella, I always called him Cupcake because he's such a sweet guy, you know? He's just Fred's just a nice guy, so I've always called him Cupcake. So when you're on my birthday, he had people, when as soon as he called in on my birthday, they pelted me with cupcakes. But what they had done is they had kept the cupcakes in the freezer all day long. So it was almost like they were just pelting me with croquet balls. Jeez. It was just like, it was brutal.
Do people really give you a hard time for that?
Everybody there's big old... There's big old... Did you just get pelted?
You know something? Not only did I just get hit with cupcakes...
Right on!
But you know what? When you hit me with cupcakes, can you hit me with softer cupcakes?
Yeah, and well, speaking from my own perspective, which I know you, and I've read you in interviews. You know, you got into like Nugent and that stuff, and then you went over to the punk side. I like some of that stuff, and I appreciate it later. I'm a big Kiss nerd, and that's my band for sure. And it was funny because you mentioned you're into the harder stuff, and at the time, like around 90, actually I think it was your first year hosting the show. I'll never forget watching the episode where you guys went to Lubbock, Texas, and interviewed Kiss on the Hot in the Shade stage during the rehearsals.
Oh yeah, I remember that too.
And at the time I'm thinking, oh man, Riki must just be in heaven right now. He's interviewing Kiss in Lubbock, Texas. And then now I think back to what your real influences are. Now I'm like, man, Riki had to interview Kiss in Lubbock, Texas.
No. Like I remember, like the second show I did, they sent me to Donington and I had to interview Aerosmith.
Yeah.
And I was freaking, I mean, Aerosmith are just icons.
Yeah.
I was so nervous to interview Aerosmith, you know? And when you're interviewing a band like Kiss, you know, whether I was listening to certain type of music, I still like some Kiss songs, and
right.
I understand how they were what they did and what they continue to do.
Right.
So, an iconic band is an iconic band, whether I like them or not. And I do like Kiss, so it's not like I didn't like them.
Oh, okay. I just didn't know if you were ever really a fan of them.
No. I mean, for the music that we played on Headbangers Ball, I would say that I liked a good 80% of it.
Oh, okay.
Some of the stuff I didn't like. It seemed kind of fake. But then there's also bands that I never liked that I find myself listening to now. So I was just like, wow, this record was really good.
Yeah, they got overlooked at the time. And well, I was gonna mention, I was gonna give you props because I remember a clip of watching you around with Kiss. You were interviewing Paul and Gene around 93, 94, I think, and you started busting on them, trying to get them to talk about doing a reunion.
Yes.
And I remember
with makeup.
Yeah, with makeup. And
I said, one time for pay-per-view, just do it one time.
Yeah, and I just remember the look on Gene's face, and then Gene looks over at you and goes, "Oh, with Battery Club opening, right?"
That's because I was in a band called Battery Club, and we ended up getting to play this big seminar, rock and roll seminar, and we actually played before Kiss. And we were nothing like Kiss, but that was I didn't even remember that. That was funny.
Yeah, that's
There's
stuck in
also
my
times
mind.
just like when I remember how furious Glenn Danzig would get at me when I'd say, let's just do a Misfits reunion. And sure enough, they did a reunion. And he would just never bring that up. It'll never happen. And sure enough, they did a Misfits reunion not that long ago, know?
Right.
So it's just funny, the things that people used to get mad and they'll never do, but they sure enough did.
Want to be a member of the Decibel Geek Army?
You slimy scumbag, get on your face and give me 25.
Join us on our fan page at facebook.com/decibelgeek. Contemplating the mysteries of the universe? Like, what were Metallica and Lou Reed smoking? This is the Decibel Geek Podcast.
Hi, this is Chris Holmes Vodka Bottle, and you're listening to the Decibel Geek Podcast. From my perspective, and my co-host who couldn't be here tonight, we grew up watching this stuff, and it was like, everybody that was old enough to go out to clubs was on Saturday night, but this was like as close as we could get to being a part of that. And I remember there were certain episodes I'll never forget, though. Like, you came in at an interesting time because when Adam Curry was hosting it, it was the glam rock type thing was just huge, and this was before grunge was starting to really hit right when you stepped in. Now, what was your opinion on that stuff coming in? Did you think, wow, we're in trouble, or with your varied taste, did you welcome the change?
See, I am that one person that always says that Nirvana did not kill the rock scene, because when I heard Nirvana, I heard a really cool rock band. And Alice in Chains belonged on Headbangers Ball, and Nirvana, until they got big, belonged on Headbangers Ball. And so did, Soundgarden. Are you going to say, oh, well, you shouldn't have played Soundgarden? Look, Soundgarden came from that, quote, grunge scene, but Soundgarden was Black Sabbath, if anything. That's what Soundgarden was. Right. So, the whole grunge thing, it was just another type of rock and roll. It didn't kill anything. If your music was so weak that you're not going to, that you can't last because another band is doing something different, then that's your fault, But I welcomed it all because I thought it was just another type of rock and roll, and I still like Nirvana.
Right. Not the greatest interview though, right?
Worst interview. That was just that's the top three things that people always mention is that Nirvana.
Well, I've been waiting 20 years to tell you that I really felt for you when I watched it that night.
I was so bummed out because I was all excited to meet Kurt Cobain, and I show up and he's like face down in the green room, and I'm like, I wanted to meet him and tell him how much I really liked the album Bleach, and and he was just passed out, and then I didn't see him until he was on the stage.
So how's it going? I mean, it's got to be, first of all, love the suit. Be very comfortable on planes, I think.
On planes, yeah. Well, it's a ball. It's Headbangers Ball, so I thought I'd wear a gown.
Dress for the ball. There you go.
He wouldn't wear his tux. He didn't give me a corsage either.
The whole ball gown, I didn't even get Headbangers Ball gown.
Right.
And he was just so out of it, just so wasted. So I was like, at that point, I was just like, you know what? Screw it. I'm just pissed off. I'm not going to be all hoppity-boppity. I'm pissed off, and it was just like, I was just it was like pulling teeth going through that interview.
Well, I guess, I mean, that was the thing with the grunge guys was like, you know, a lot of those bands in interviews would be just so sullen. And I always kind of let me ask you, because you interviewed most of these guys, were there any of these bands, and you don't even have to name them, but when you interviewed them, they were sullen, soft-spoken, act like they hate everything, and then the minute the cameras go off, they're like, hey, how's it going, man?
No, because this is the thing. You say that, but what is the most popular episode of Headbangers Ball ever? What do you think is the episode that was talked about more than any episode that people always say was their favorite episode? It would be Alice in Chains at the water park.
Yeah.
That was the best show ever. And Alice in Chains, which were lumped into that grunge category, they got Headbangers Ball better than any band did.
Right.
Because at the water park, it was freaking hilarious. And then when we did a thing at some mansion, they all were in like robes and turbans and smoking cigars and acting like, you know, like talking funny.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember having fun with Lane Staley in New Orleans. I mean, you know, that's a band that you would think their music would really be, you know, that really toned down.
Mm-hmm.
But in fact, they were one of the funniest bands that we ever worked with ever on Headbangers Ball, as being upbeat. If anything, it was the real heavy kind of death metal bands that wouldn't have fun.
Right.
You know, Slayer would always have fun.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Megadeth, you never know.
Right.
But it really wasn't those type of bands. And, you know, if you act like that with me, then I'm bored and I just want to get through the interview. I don't care who you are. You know? It's like, we're playing rock and roll. Have fun.
Yeah, it's not, as George Bush would say, it's not rocket surgery, right?
Exactly.
Well, one of my favorite episodes, you mentioned Megadeth, was the skydiving episode. Now,
yeah, that was great. What actually happened is I ended up going skydiving like about 2 or 3 times with Dave before we shot it.
Mm-hmm.
So my first time jumping out of a plane wasn't me attached to some guy. So I ended up going, and after that one, I ended up getting well over 40 jumps and kept on skydiving for a long time and really, really got into it.
Wow. That's
so
cool.
That was really cool.
Now, was there any, like, who did you interview on the show that you, that surprised you? Is there anyone you thought, this is gonna be horrible, and then you wound up just loving the interview that you got?
I don't remember.
Remember.
My problem is, I mean, the reason there isn't a book is because I don't remember anything.
Right.
I can't remember. I mean, you know, if somebody acted like a jerk, then I just put it out there. And if there was somebody that I had fun with, I always had fun with Pantera.
Uh-huh.
Pantera was always fun. Anthrax was always fun. And just great guys, you know.
Right. Do you stay in touch with any of those bands from that era?
Nope.
No?
The only people that I talk to in bands, I still talk to Tammy.
Mm-hmm.
I still talk to Gilby Clarke. I run into Slash and Duff occasionally. The only musician Mark Morton of Lamb of God,
mm-hmm. I
speak with all the time. He's probably one of my best friends. He's just a great, great guy, and I'm always in contact with Mark Morton. I talk to Fred Corey from Cinderella once in a while. When me and Kerry King were neighbors, you know, we'd hang out a little bit, and Kerry's a great guy. But there's not really that. I mean, to be honest, I don't like people in bands because I like people, just regular people.
Right.
And usually the people that are in bands that I hang out with now are people that were my friends before they were in bands. You know what I mean? There's certain people that I'll run into, like, you know, I'll run into Ricky Rocket or Brett. Mm-hmm. And those guys are just great, great guys.
Mm-hmm.
And they're really nice. So whenever I see them, I love talking to those guys.
Oh,
and, you know, it's neat because now when I do things, I hosted the Rock of Ages premiere. So I got to see Def Leppard and I got to see all those guys. And it's really fun to meet people like that. I mean, that band I had interviewed before. But for me to see certain band members that are like, hey, Ricky, and I'm like, wow, that guy knows who I am, you know, because I'm not a musician, and I'm not a freaking journalist. I'm a rock fan.
Well,
so when I get to meet people and meet bands that I really like, you know, I just think, oh my God, and okay, and the one band that I haven't mentioned at all that I liked before I ever did Headbangers Ball and still like to this day is Motorhead. I will always go see Motorhead.
Oh, I hear you. Let me just he's a great individual. Yeah, I watched the documentary a couple of weeks ago. It's an amazing, it's amazing look at his life for sure.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah. Definitely someone who I've always wanted to meet. But now...
Lemmy is a great interview.
Oh, I'm sure, yeah. I mean, he does not hold back. He definitely says what's on his mind.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to mention... Well, and then Headbangers Ball just out of nowhere just gets canceled in January '95, and from what I've read, you basically just got a phone call that said, don't come to work.
That's exactly what happened. I was pissed. I wanted to do my goodbye show so bad, but they wouldn't even let me do a goodbye show.
It's strange how sudden it was. I mean,
it was just, we were on for 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And to this day, I do a lot of stuff with VH1. I did all the reality shows, and I do stuff with VH1 all the time. I don't do anything with MTV, and that really bummed me out. You know? And I even said, I go, hey, let's just do a Headbangers Ball special. You don't even have to pay me. Let's just do it for fun.
Right.
Nothing.
Did they say why it just abruptly ended so quickly?
Nope.
Nope. Man, it's crazy.
They put on some other stupid show, and it failed.
If you could time travel back to the 90s and someone told you what the programming would be on MTV now, what do you think your reaction would have been?
I would have said it's music television.
Yep.
They play music, right? I mean, and then I remember even saying, hey, well, at least we got VH1 playing music.
Right.
And they don't even play music. And VH1 was almost album rock. And I'll tell you that sometimes if I'm in the gym or something, and I'll say, okay, let me put on, VH1 for when they're doing Quick Start, and just hear who some of the bands are that people are listening to. And I don't want to sound like the grumpy old man, but I'll tell you right now, the music out today that people are listening to is freaking garbage.
I agree.
It is so horrible. I mean, that's why I like a lot of country bands now. So the whole outlaw country thing I really like a lot because it's something that's kind of, at least they're doing something that I haven't heard.
Right.
I think that this whole auto-tune thing and these machines, and I mean, even the hip-hop artists, they don't rhyme anymore.
No, they don't even try.
It's just horrible. I hate music today. There's very, very few bands that I like.
Right.
Very few.
Well, and you mentioned liking country, and then I've done research, and I saw you wound up doing stuff with WCW, and you've done stuff for NASCAR. Now, you and me need to trade places because I don't like country, I don't like wrestling, and I don't like NASCAR, yet I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and you're in L.A. So we need to switch houses.
And you know what? NASCAR, I've always had a passion for.
Oh, really?
And one day in 1994, I was walking at the Daytona. This is while I was still on Headbangers Ball. And I was walking down the front stretch of Daytona International Speedway, and I said, I'm going to find a way to make a living in NASCAR. And I've made a good living with 90% of my income NASCAR-related for just about 10 years.
Wow.
And I could not be happier. And I interview every driver. I get to go to the races. I just have fun, and I love NASCAR. And there's a lot of rockers that are really into NASCAR too. And now there's a lot of drivers that are really getting into some good music. Paul Menard really loves metal bands and stuff like that. So it's a blast.
Well, because I was reading this and I was like, well, geez, he needs to move to the South then,
Yeah, I am without a doubt the biggest redneck from Hollywood. I mean, I live seriously about 1.5 miles from the Sunset Strip, and my house is covered in NASCAR memorabilia, and it's crazy. I'm basically a redneck from Hollywood, and always have been.
You're my West Coast white trash connection now.
Without a doubt.
Oh man. Well, so basically the NASCAR thing is basically your main gig at this point, right? Yeah,
that is my main gig. I mean, I have a NASCAR radio show. It's on 100 stations. It's about to celebrate its 10th anniversary in April. And there's been talk here and there, different TV shows, but the problem is unless you're screaming and yelling and fighting or being an idiot, nobody wants it, and I'm not going to do that stuff. Right. So right now, I have a couple other things that are in the works, and we'll just see, but I'm having fun, and right now I'm just can't wait to get riding because for 3 weeks all I'm going to think about is riding. And I'm hosting I'm hosting 2 nights at the Sturgis Saloon. I mean, this is great because Sturgis Saloon, one night they've got Faster Pussycat, then the other night they have Gilby Clarke, Reverend Horton Heat, and the Super Suckers, which is just like those are all the bands I love, and I'm the MC. So and it's at Sturgis, so Sturgis is going to be really, really fun this year.
Well, I appreciate your time. I'm gonna try to go ahead and cut this off now because I don't want to take up too much of your time, and I know you got a lot on your plate. But it's an honor to talk to you, and
well, thank you very much.
It's very cool. And where can people check out all your stuff and follow you on your ride?
The best place would probably be through my Twitter account, and I'm going to try to set up a website like for the ride. But in the meantime, just follow my Twitter account. And that'll have different links to all the different stuff. And we'll be posting videos, and we're actually going to have it so you can follow where we are in real time. Like, let's say if you live in, Portland, Oregon, and then you're looking at us and like, oh my God, they're like an hour from Portland, Oregon. Let's go meet them there. And I'm going to be bringing boxes of Chico sticks with me and handing out Chico sticks to people along the way.
Big fan of Chico sticks?
Huge.
Oh, okay.
I love that. It's my favorite candy.
Really?
And people can't find it. When I started talking about it, people thought it was really cool. So I got a couple boxes, and I'm going to go there, and like if I see you and they're like, hey, Ricky, we follow you on Twitter. Hey, can I have a Chico stick? I'll give you a Chico stick.
You may have a spokesman deal in the works.
What was that?
I said you may have a spokesman gig in the works then.
Hey, you know what? There's different things that I have done for companies where I have been a spokesperson for things. Mm-hmm. But the reason that I wanted to do it with Chico Stick is if I said I was somewhere passing out M&Ms to people, people would figure this is a paying gig.
Right.
But this is just like a fun candy you can't find anywhere, and I like it. So I thought that it would just be really, really fun. And if you see us on the road and you want to buy us dinner, buy us dinner. If you want Ricky and Tammy to spend the night at your house, give us a place to stay. We'll stay there. We're bringing tents and sleeping bags. We really don't know what we're doing.
You just know it'll be fun, right?
I just know it's going to be fun. It's going to be a little bit under 5,000 miles and 3 countries, 11 states. That's awesome. And we start in Rosarito, Mexico. So if we get out of Mexico, okay, then we know everything from there is going to be easy.
Very cool. Well, if you ever do another one and you wind up going through Nashville, let me know and we'll hook up.
Well, eventually I will. Eventually I'll do the coast to coast.
All right. Well, we look forward to having you, and definitely thanks again for coming on the show.
Oh, no problem. Thank you.
Man, Chris, I'm sure glad you got that one covered. I don't think I could have spoke that long tonight.
It was a pleasure getting to talk to Riki Rachtman because as you'll hear in the interview, I'm a fanboy of this kind of stuff. This is the stuff
sure.
I grew. This is why we do the show.
That's why it's called Decibel Geek.
Yeah, I mean, no one's going to confuse us with 60 Minutes. We're not doing gotcha journalism. But it's like we find people that we looked up to, or that we dug back in the day, and we find out what they're up to now, and what their thought process was. And
Riki Rachtman's a perfect example of that. I mean, when I was a kid, we lived on the outskirts of town. Back then, we didn't have cable, so you'd only get the 3 or 4 local channels. Mm-hmm. So I would beg my parents to be able to spend the night in town at my friend's house just so we could watch the ball. And, no matter what was going on a Saturday night, at that time, whatever, we could be hanging out with girls or whatever, boom, we got to go because we got to watch the ball. Never missed it.
Yeah, because during those years, at least at my age, I couldn't go to clubs.
Right.
This was as close as you could get to that lifestyle.
That's right.
So, but those were great stories, great memories about, he didn't shy away from anything. He told us, his thoughts on MTV, on the whole Nirvana interview thing, skydiving with Megadeth. I think it was a great interview, and I'm really appreciative of him coming on the show.
We'll have to get him back on sometime because I got a feeling he's got a million more stories he could tell.
Oh yeah, we could have gone longer, but he's in the process of preparing for this trip that he's on now, and that trip is the mexam marada trip with Tammy Down, a Faster Pussycat. As of the date of this recording, they're in Washington State heading into Canada, and then they'll be heading on the way back. You can actually track them you can follow him at Riki Rachtman on Twitter, and that's the best place to go. He's also on Facebook, and then they have a live tracking thing, and I'll include the link in the show notes, and you can actually see all the stops that they make. So,
cool.
Very cool thing. Must be nice to be able to go all over.
Yeah, no kidding.
Motorcycles. So, I'm not a motorcycle guy, but I mean, that'd be a pretty cool trip to go on.
It would be pretty cool.
So, let's plug the website and the Facebook page real quick one more time before we head out.
www.dbgeekshow.blogspot.com. And, of course, we're on Facebook. That's a great place to get involved in the discussion. You can check us out there. Just look up, just type in Decibel Geek.
Facebook.com/Decibel Geek.
It'll bring it up. I think most people just go in and type in Decibel Geek.
Yeah, that'll work, too.
That works. Take you right to it. We've got all kinds of cool stuff going on. What we've got coming up next week is a special treat because you guys have wanted one of these for a long time. And we haven't done it in a while, and we'll have to see how my voice is holding up. I mean, we're going to do it next week. We're going to go back in time.
Yeah, we're
not going to tell you what year. DeLorean. We're not going to tell you what year just yet, but we're going back in time once again for.
But I'll give you a small clue, and this is only for those of you that have really paid attention to the crap that I've blathered through the whole show. I'll just say we're going back to a time that I first got into Kiss. That's all I'm going to say.
There you go.
If you've paid attention, you already know what year.
You know what year it is. All right. I know what time it is. Time to wrap it up for the week. I hate to go, but it's time.
See you next week.
You guys have a good one. We'll see you next week.
Remember to check us out at dbgeekshow.blogspot.com, facebook.com/decibelgeek, and Twitter at Decibel Geek Pod. Also available for free on iTunes and Stitcher Radio.
You ought to do as you are told. You're gonna do as you are told.